I asked you guys for your favorite Bros Attack in Dream Team, and here's the list. And if you haven't voted for any of the fan-voted lists, check in the info card and in the description below for the video that you want to vote for. But other than that, let's talk about the rules for a second. Obviously, this ranks every single Bros Attack, counting Luigi attacks, and if there was a tie, which there 100% was, I got to get the power, and I got to rank which one got higher and which one got lower. And these results were very top-heavy. Most of the really bad Bros Attacks never got even a single vote. And I'm pretty sure, I think like maybe more than half didn't even get one vote, which kind of shows how top-heavy the Bros Attacks in this game actually are. But honestly, there is still some interesting results, so other than that, don't forget to subscribe so the troops don't die, and let's get started. The Luigi Typhoon got 0 votes, and guess what? I don't think it even deserved 1. And I'm glad I get to put it at number 16, because this might be my least favorite Bros Attack in any Mario RPG. And I'm gonna break it down I'm gonna break the whole attack down for you. The thing about this attack is you have to spend 16 BP. 16 BP is the most amount of BP you can spend on a Bros attack. That's already not a good sign for it. But you know, maybe it's just a really overpowered attack like the Z Egg, so it has to actually be costing this much. So you actually pull it out, and then there's this tornado that you have to whip up with Mario. You have to get it as close to Mario as possible to get the most amount of power dealt. Now, if you miss this, and you do it too late, then Mario just gets thrown onto one of the enemies and does very minimal damage, so you just wasted 16 BP. And if you do it too early, you don't have enough Luiginaries to actually do enough damage for it to be worth 16 BP. But let's say you actually get it perfect. So you start trying to get every single enemy into the Typhoon, and you just start spamming B. But then you realize how hard it is to control the Typhoon to actually lead you into the enemies and actually pick them up. Now, spamming B is pretty easy, but once all those enemies are in the air, you're just wasting time because, well, you're not doing any damage to them and you're just waiting for them to fall. But then an enemy falls in a place that you don't actually expect it, so you have to loop around, which takes a really long time because it's a Typhoon and it's really hard to control. And I think you could tell my problem with this thing. It's hard to control, you can mess up at the beginning, and it costs 16 BP. And might I add that you can just use the Luigi wall and it will probably do more damage. That's the thing about this item. The Luigi Typhoon is replaceable, and it doesn't deserve to be 16 BP. Heck, I don't even think it deserves to be 10 BP. Making it something like the Luigi Hammer Power or the Luigi Stack Power is just really dumb because you're trying to use it as a horde. You have inconsistent damage on a horde, which means you might as well just use the Luigi wall. I don't think that there's even a purpose for this item to exist. It costs way too much, and I don't even think that you should use it at all except for trying to complete the expert challenge of actually getting an X on it once. That's it. Don't use this item after. The Luigi stack is kind of like the Luigi Typhoon as its usefulness, but it doesn't cost as much and it's not annoying to control. Even though I am worse at this attack than the Luigi Typhoon, but I'm not actually annoyingly bad where I actually hate it because of it. The thing about this attack though is that it's really only useful for the Wakeport Big Massive Hunt, because you only have the Luigi Ball and the Luigi Stack. But you kind of have to use the Luigi Stack if you want to target the Hoorahs or Big Massive. But other than that, this thing's useless. Why would you use the Luigi Stack if you have stuff like the Legionary Wall, the Legionary Hammer, the Legionary Ball, Legionary Flame, kind of. That's the thing about this attack. Again, it's kind of replaceable, which is obviously a problem for me. And the fact that it's really hard to actually get an excellent, because you have to get almost every single perfect stack. And if you get a really bad mess up, then you can end your attack, you could fall over, you could really get minimal damage. It's really hard to get an excellent on it, but it's really easy to get a great, which is enough damage for the stage of the game you're actually in. Where the Legionary Typhoon, if you mess up really badly, then it's not enough damage that actually supports the place you are in the game. That's the problem with it. You need to be really good at the Legionary Typhoon, where with the Legionary stack, you really only need to be okay with it to do good enough damage, which is probably why it's number 15, as well as it's cheaper. This is the last Bros attack I don't actually enjoy using, and well, it's the worst attack in the real world. The Drop Chopper, I thought was gonna get some votes, or at least one, but in reality, why would you vote for the Drop Chopper over stuff like the Star Rocket or Z-Egg? So I guess that kind of makes sense. The thing about this thing, though, is the gyro controls aren't awful, but I really don't want them there, especially because you don't actually use the circle pad, so you might as well just use that. As well as, I am awful at this attack. This is the worst attack for me about how I perform with it, because I keep trying to get forward, but I'm trying to get it perfect, but because I try to get it perfect, I wait too long and then it goes past the enemy, which means I waste BP, which is annoying. Obviously, you can tell from the Legionary Typhoon, I don't really like wasting BP, but at least in this sense, it's not awful. You can still get some damage that's not, like, extremely minuscule, kind of like the Legionary Typhoon, but honestly, I don't want to use this attack over the Star Rocket, and even when you get the Slingshot, you might as well just use that, so it's really replaced pretty soon. Obviously, Driftwood Shore is a place where you kind of have to use it as your best Bros attack, but you don't actually have to use it as a Bros attack for a while, because, well, you don't really have to fight another boss in the real world until, I think, Popple and Wiggler, so you just get the Slingshot after, so you might as well just use that. The 3D green shell is the first ever Bros item you get for Luigi. It's the exact same thing as 3D red shell, and it's just worse because it's a little bit less powerful, because Luigi's not as powerful as Mario, as well as it gets replaced sooner, so there's not really any point of using this thing after you get out of Dozing Sands. Yay! This thing has so little to talk about. I literally just said the reasons. This thing gets replaced almost immediately, and it does less damage than the 3D red shell, so it's kinda pointless. Wow, the exact same music is in the background, which means that we're talking about the original Bros item from this game, the 3D red shell. And I'm just gonna talk about, I guess, why would anyone vote for this? Obviously, the 3D red shell is better than the 3D green shell, and that's because, well, it does more damage. It does a tiny bit more damage because Mario's more powerful, and it doesn't get replaced until you get to Wakeport. So, it makes sense to be a little bit better. It's not amazing, but at least you get to use it for 2 bosses, where the 3D green shell is only used for 1. So, I guess just because of that, it's better. And also, it's really easy to pull off. So, obviously, it's why both of them are above the bottom 3, but why would you vote for this? Why would you vote for the 3D green shell or the 3D red shell when there's so many better Bros attacks in this game? Which, I'm glad no one voted for this, because it just doesn't make sense for you to vote for this thing. I think the Jetboard Bash has one huge weakness, but honestly, I kind of expected it to get like one vote. Maybe just because it's really satisfying to hit the enemy with your hammer and just watch it swing. But aside from it not being able to attack air enemies, which I do find a problem, the problem with this attack is that it's actually pretty difficult to get an excellent. And kind of like the Luigi Typhoon, well, at least the beginning of it, you have to get as close to the enemy with your hammer swing as possible to get that actual excellent. But at the very least, if you get it too early, then you still get it great, which is obviously some really good damage. As well as, again, not attacking air enemies isn't a bad thing, but attacking enemies that have higher hitboxes, not being able to hit those is a really bad thing. As well as, it just gets replaced with the Z-Egg, and I think that's a huge problem, that it's not really able to stand out when the Z-Egg is just there, where even the satisfying factor is still with the Z-Egg, which is just a thing that you would think the Jetboard Bash has. Like, people would think that, oh, the Jetboard Bash at least has the satisfying factor of hitting your hammer really fast through it and it goes into slow motion. No, the Z-Egg has something even more satisfying, which is kind of depressing for the Jetboard Bash. The Fire Flower has a really weird ability because of the set of bros items that was given to Luigi, and we'll talk about that with the next entry as well, with Mario. The thing about the Fire Flower, though, is that it's the only item that actually spreads out damage evenly with enemies. And the Sling Sniper's a toss-up, because technically if you align it correctly, then you can, but it's really hard to, and sometimes you get unlucky where there's too many enemies where you can actually do that. But the Fire Flower, it can do it really easily, and it honestly is supposed to, so that's pretty nice. But you don't really use it for too many boss fights. It's really only useful for enemy fights, which is probably why it's lower than the next entry, but it's obviously better than the entries we talked about beforehand, because it does have a distinct purpose, as well as the fact of, well, it doesn't really get replaced, well, at least power-wise, it doesn't get replaced until, like, Sling Sniper, so you get to use it for a decent amount of time, longer than the items that you got beforehand. I talked about in the last entry that the Bye-Bye Cannon, well, not specifically the Bye-Bye Cannon, but the next entry, so this one, has a really special ability. And you may be wondering, what in the world does the Bye-Bye Cannon have? Well, it's the only attack that actually focuses on jumping on the enemy. And that makes it really effective on Momoshka, which I think most people know this, but it's actually really effective as well on the final boss. It's really effective on Dreamy Bowser because you get criticals every single time you jump on Bowser. So, you don't want to use the Z-Egg, you don't want to use the Jetboard Bash, no. You want to use the Bye-Bye Cannon. Something that you got really early game. And, well, it kind of makes sense. First things first, this is an easy attack to pull off. It obviously takes memory, but it's not awful. So, obviously, it's not a hard attack to pull off. I think it has a reasonable amount of BP, and it doesn't really get replaced because of that special attribute. Obviously, power-wise, it gets replaced by the Bomb Derby, and obviously by the Z-Egg, but by its special attribute, it will never get replaced. So that's why I have it at number 9. This item 100% deserved some votes, and the Sling Sniper. Why did no one vote for this thing? If you get a critical with the Sling Sniper, this is one of the most damaging bros items. So, if you can pull off the most amount of damage with a Sling Sniper, why did no one vote for it? And frankly, I didn't vote for it either, but honestly, I kind of expected for it to at least get one vote. And it's kind of disappointing that this got 0 votes. It's sad, but it absolutely deserved it. It's in my top 5 bros items. So, obviously I had to rank it at the best of the ones that got 0 votes. And, well, that means that the next items that we talk about will actually have some votes. That's going to be very interesting. But some of the stuff that got votes should have been lower than the Sling Sniper, so it's kind of disappointing. The Star Rocket deserved more votes, but at the very least, we have the statistic that I do believe is accurate, and this is the highest voted Luigi Bros attack, which means 2 things. 1, this poll was at least accurate at that sense, and 2, the Luigi Bros attacks compared to the Luiginary attacks and Mario's Bros attacks are probably the weakest out of the 3, because only 1 vote altogether actually went to a Luigi Bros attack, and it makes sense. At least it went to this attack. The Star Rocket is a really powerful attack. I personally would have wanted this in the top 5. I kind of wanted more people to vote for this thing, but at least it got 1 vote. At least it had that accurate statistic, so I'm fine with it, even though it's easily the best Luigi attack, by far. It's in my top 3, personally, but I respect it being at number 7. Here's the thing about the Bomb Derby. Personally, I'd pick the Z-Egg, like, by far. I would easily use the Z-Egg over the Bomb Derby, but if you're bad at the Z-Egg, then don't pick the Jetport Bash, pick the Bomb Derby. That's why I think it definitely got some votes, as well as the fact that it's pretty useful in the Wiggler fight. Okay, it's not extremely useful for bosses, but kind of like the Fire Flower, it's pretty useful to use against normal enemies because it spreads out the damage pretty evenly. Not as evenly as the Fire Flower, but the best you got for Mario, so you have to basically live with it. And also the Bomb Derby actually has some decent power for trying to spread out damage. It has a decent amount of power, especially, well, for getting it somewhat early in the game, it's somewhat powerful. So it's a nice attack, and, well, I like it a decent amount. I'd probably pick the Z-Egg over it, but I can definitely see why people voted for this thing. If you guys know, this is my favorite Bros attack from this game, and I did vote for the Luiginary Hammer, so it only getting 2 votes, including mine, is a bit disappointing. But the reason why that this attack is so useful is because every single other Bros attack in the Dream World attacks a group of enemies, aside from the Luiginary stack, but that one's really hard to pull off perfectly. The Luiginary Hammer focuses 1 enemy, and this is really helppful for bosses like in Tasma X, Bowser X, kind of. You might as well just jump on him, you can just do that and you'll be fine. Just other bosses that only have 1 enemy that you actually need to take out. Big Massive X is another example. Bosses like that are extremely benefited by you using the Luiginary Hammer. So, using it is really easy, and as well as it's not actually expensive at all. You get it at Mount Pajama, which means that it's only gonna cost like 10 BP because it's a pretty early game weapon. So, it's really easy to pull off. It has a really good use. It does a lot of damage, and it's really just a good item. And it's why it's my favorite. It's my favorite Luiginary attack, and it's my favorite Bros attack in this game. So it's a shame that no one else voted for it. To me, the Luiginary Flame does not deserve to be in the top 5, or really even in like the top 8. Okay, fine. I'll give this credit. I'll give credit to the Luiginary Flame that easily it's the easiest Luiginary attack to pull off, and probably one of the easiest Bros attacks to pull off in this game. It's very consistent, and I could probably pull it off probably 100 times and not mess up. I will give it credit for that. But the problem is that this attack is deceiving. The reason why is because it shows that it's going to attack the whole horde, but it just misses those little enemies that are sometimes important. And the problem with that is that I'm talking about the Elite Trio. And I actually noticed this when I was fighting Elite Trio X. I was using Luiginary Flame, and then I just saw that it wasn't hitting some of the captains, which meant the damage wasn't spread out evenly, and it knocked out some of the captains earlier than I thought it would. So that's very annoying, and it's very deceiving because you don't really expect it. I will still give it credit that's really easy to pull off, but I don't think it deserved to be in like the top 7. I don't think it deserved to be in the top half. I'd probably put it maybe where under like the bye-bye cannon. But this is not the biggest thing I disagree with. That comes a bit later. While I didn't have the Luiginary Wall in my top 3 on my list, I had it at number 4, and it being top 3 on this list, it makes sense. I think this is easily the best attack to use to deal with hordes. And the reason why is because you get to control exactly where Luigi goes while he's swinging the hammer, which is nice because some of the attacks actually don't have that, as well as it does a lot of damage, especially if you're really good with ricochets. If you're not good at this attack, then you probably vote for something else that we haven't talked about yet. But if you're really good at it, and the people that did vote for it know that this attack is really powerful at dealing with hordes. And since most of the dream world is dealing with hordes enemies, this is a really good attack. 4 people actually voted for the Luiginary Ball, and personally, I don't even have this in my top 8. I don't even have it in the top half. But I will admit that it's somewhat easy to pull off, and it's good at dealing with hordes, especially with weaker enemies. The problem with this, though, is just use a Luiginary Wall. And I know you can say that it's really cheap, and I would agree with this statement, but I would just rather just use a Luiginary Wall. There's no point of actually using an attack where it's not consistent of getting every single enemy, especially if the horde's too big. The bigger the horde, the bigger the ball actually gets, and sometimes the horde is too big to actually have the ball cover it, and that's notable in the later areas. But in reality, I thought about it for a bit, and I realized that this at least deserved to be in the top 5. Not number 2, but definitely in the top 5, because it's really good with dealing with earlier enemies, and it's pretty cheap to pull off. But I will admit that the gyro controls and it just being replaced by the Luiginary Wall definitely would not put it this high for me. Even though I do at least respect it, getting a lot of votes. While this isn't my favorite Bros attack from this game, it is my favorite Bros attack in the real world, so I'm really glad that the Z-Egg got number 1. First off, it does the most damage for Mario, which is really nice. Secondly, it's really satisfying to pull off, and the whole sequence of getting the Z-Keeper, shooting another Wake Beam, and just using Mario and Luigi to use their hammers and swing down, and then just this huge explosion on the enemy is so satisfying. And it's what I was talking about with the Jet Bar Bash segment, where this is a really satisfying attack to pull off. As well as, if you get a lucky hit on this, you are doing an immense amount of damage. And, oh my god, it is so satisfying to pull stuff like that off. Especially with all this just falling down, the atmosphere is perfect. And I like that this is optional, because this is a really, really powerful attack that you don't really need in this game, but you worked your butt off saving all those pillows, and this is what you get as your reward, and it's totally worth it. And it's kind of a surprise that technically the only optional Bros attack, well, if you didn't really have to collect attack pieces, the only optional Bros attack is the one that got number 1, and I'm totally fine with this being number 1, and it really deserved it. Thank you guys for watching this video. My next video will be about the second Partners in Time fan voted list. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so the Shroops don't die, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.